into the fold, so welcome. And we've been working, if you've been away, on trying to connect the dots between pranayama or breath awareness work and the physiology of the body or the postures of the body and how the breath, and more specifically how the diaphragm and the action and attention to the diaphragm can give the body integrity. A better word might be something called tensegrity, which I mentioned in my email, where a balloon, for example, if you were to just reach your arms open and keeping your heart center soft, fill from the bottom to the top like a balloon, and so that the arms become appendages of this filling of the main frame of the body, the axial skeleton, if you will, the torso, and then the limbs, the legs and the arms. If I'm doing something extreme in yoga, can I sustain or maintain a pose like this, which seems rather goofy, and use my breath to do that? Or do I just tense my jaw, tense my body, and suffer? So the choice is yours. And most people, because of the culture we live in, the no pain, no gain, are doing exactly that. It's even worse now coming out of this COVID cloud, if you will, because people's nervous systems have been so disrupted and their sense of solid ground has been so removed that I don't know if you've noticed, but when they go back to activity, whether it's walking, whether it's driving a car, bicycling, they're completely nutso. Their nervous systems are running away with their bodies, trying to catch up, if you will, to normalcy. But what we really want to do, in my opinion, is to settle into our breath and become more aware of the innards of the yoga, which is what it was designed to do, is to calm down the mind and the breath and make you plug in to these systems you have in the body, which are operating independent of your control. Your heart's beating, your diaphragm, lungs are breathing. You don't have to control them. And so if you're just exercising and moving your limbs vigorously without awareness of these things, and I'm not talking about putting electronic measurements to see what your pulse is, etc. Those are good, but they're external validations or measurements, scientific, of what's going on inside. So I could know that my heart rate is beating at a certain beat per minute, my breath rate is a certain, but am I actually, with my consciousness, my brain, am I actually, as we take a hand to the belly for a moment and feel in a visceral way, visceral coming from viscera, organs, the expansion of the diaphragm. And if we know a little bit about the physiology of the diaphragm, we know that it's not only expanding this, what I call the lower hoop or trampoline. On the inhale, it's going down. And so if you're just puffing out your belly, a lot of people will stop coming to class because they're sick. Like my wife said the other day, like, well, I want strong abs. I don't want to have some fat Buddha belly. That's not it. We're not doing a distending of the abdomen. So place your hand on your abdomen and don't pull it in, but just under that. So the diaphragm is a little bit below this solar plexus, and it's expanding the lower ribs around the back ribs, and it's also going down So if you close your eyes, you might be able to feel even on the inhale that there's a downward trajectory, which indeed, in fact, engages the deep core, which the yogis know is known as a Uddiyana Bandha. And then exhaling, releasing. And you come to the stasis of the breath, the pause and the exhale. Another inhale comes in. You feel this expansion. And I've been encouraging people to breathe more into the back ribs, so you can even take your hands there to feel that opening, and then exhale, release, soften the tongue, the nervous system, the esophagus, and we drop into the calm sense of the nervous system. So we're starting to fill up the balloon, and I've been proposing this 20 breath method, so we'll try that. But try to delineate, and this is hard work, because most people are totally clueless about their inner body. In that we have to pay attention to what's happening with that trampoline. So that lower trampoline of the diaphragm is expanding, yes, but also going down. And as it does, the back ribs, the back lobes of the lungs, if you're doing it right, they automatically light up and lift. So I don't have to yank my arms up in the air just yet. I can just keep them still and go for 20 breaths, trying to imagine this trampoline, extending the hoop and then releasing. And this is almost, what does this remind you of? For me, it's a pump. It's like a little pump going down the little, and then exhale, whoosh, and up comes the residual. And I've been proposing a wave action, so we actually did this rolling back, inhale, fill up from the back ribs, mid ribs, and the upper scapies, spreading them out, and then rolling forward like a wave, and then opening the mouth, creating that sound of the ocean. So you can also, if you're a more fidgety person, or someone who hasn't been playing with this as much and wants to be more mechanical minded, start to bring this wave action, which in the past I've called paradoxical breath. And as you expand, start with the back ribs, mid ribs in the back, shoulder blades spread apart, and then you roll forward, the wave crashes, the breath, and everything softens. At the 20th breath, we pause, softening our vagus nerve, our nervous system. Of course, the diaphragm is loaded with nerves, and we just sit in it. So then we're in our meditative mindset from which we can launch all sorts of fun and games with the body. But we're not going into an exercise with this fight or flight. I've got to do my 20-mile run, my 10-mile row, right? And what do you think that does to the nervous system? Maybe you get 10, 20 minutes of release, but I guarantee you that the old patterns of the nervous system, the stress patterns, they climb right back on board. So here we go. It's all a big experiment. If you need to take a hand to your belly and chest, you can, but otherwise just feel it. If you want to do the undulation, do that. If you want to be still, meditative people, and you can feel this much more internally, and I'll count some breaths for you, or you can just count on your own. But it's a full expansion like a balloon without getting tense in the jaw, and then release. Here we go. Inhale. And let the body move whether you're actively waving or undulating. And if you are doing the accordion undulation, be soft in the shoulders, be soft in the ribs. Don't force the body initially. These patterns that we're creating become internalized as you feel that diaphragm trampoline and work with it, dance with it. Don't force it, but let it fill the sails of the lungs, the back ribs, the shoulder blades, and don't push the breath out either. The more you do this, as we take 10 more breaths, the slower you begin to breathe, not by trying to restrict the breath, but in fact starting to follow and let the diaphragm do its work. It wants to breathe. It wants to give you oxygen. It wants to support your body. It's the main support mechanism of the body. 5 more breaths. Complete balloon filling. And then on the next exhale, pause. Soften right here in the solar plexus. And just relax. Doesn't mean collapse, but now your balloon has filled. And if you imagine the floor, pelvic floor, which you've accessed through the breath, we'll get into that, is a little center pin. So the balloon body of the lungs and the upper body can float in any pattern if you relax, wobble, without actively trying to push the body. You can have a fluid seat, if you will. It's not rigid in stone, but once you've plugged into the lower deep core, you have relaxation and support. Let's do it again, and notice one more piece. As I inhale, I don't struggle and lift my head up like chest breathing athletes. I, if anything, slightly tilt like a swan the neck forward and breathe up into the nose, if you can. So just, and then you're vertical with the spine and horizontal with the eyes. So you can exhale through the mouth if you want, but see if you can inhale through the nose. In the inhales, primarily, if you're just coming into this practice, feel the diaphragm, work with it. Let it spread the lower ribs, come up the back ribs, scapula, upper ribs, and release. As it's spreading on the inhale, it's also moving downward, connecting you to your deep abdominal muscles. Maybe you can feel that pelvic floor go pink and light up. And just work at your own pace. The main thing we're doing here is expanding the breath, expanding the ribs, while keeping the nervous system relaxed. 10 more. If you can create the sound of the breath. Again, not a violent, like an athlete or a weightlifter. Just to release that CO2 from the body, release that stress. Fill, imagine the diaphragm Bringing in the oxygen, this is good, this is positive, it's opening. And then the stress goes out. And we are left with the sense of fullness in the body, the support. And 5 more. Again, the shoulder blades spread. It's almost like a butterfly stroke if you're a swimmer, right? And then the next exhale, pause. You should feel the alignment, the internal alignment of the vertical body from the pelvic floor through the plexus, through the throat, through the crown of the head, all the proposed chakras in the body, which are known as wheels, are also mini trampolines that are moving with the breath. Don't get too involved in the technology other than the diaphragm for now. And here we go again, inhale. Again, you can create a wave if you're new. Bring up the back ribs, mid ribs, and the elbows almost want to magically lift as the breath comes up into these upper back ribs. Now, everyone who's in the group, there's a couple of rowers. We're underneath the lat muscles, which are a giant triangle of support with shoulders and the low back. So you may be able to feel the lats like cobra hoods flaring out with the movement of the breath. But it's not a muscular contraction, it's an expansion. Five more. Again, move to your own breath. You may notice that as you breathe, that your diaphragm is more intelligent on one side or the other. So as it spreads out and down, you can feel maybe the pelvic floor and the inner hips, sit bones being pressed and anchored to the ground as the rest of the body lifts. You might feel that one side is just better. 5 more. Then we'll experiment with the arms and the legs. Pausing, softening the tongue, not collapsing, but lining up all the dots in the vertical skeleton. So I'm sitting on keel, so to speak, pardon the nautical, but I'm not trying to yank my shoulders back, grab and contract my abdominals. Very slight, deep core that's holding me from the pelvic floor to my transverse abdominals, and the rest of the body can breathe. So that when we get into yoga poses, we should be able to keep the nervous system calm, to keep the breath moving and fluid. So let's try an experiment on the next one. We're gonna bring the arms into it like this. So as you roll back and breathe, you can even trace your fingers along the lower ribs, right? And then the exhale, like you're holding a little ball within the arms. And let's start to swim a little bit. You could be seated in a chair, by the way, which I've mentioned in other classes, with the knees apart. Now I want you to keep the elbows and the arm bones soft. I want the tensegrity of the diaphragm, the rib cage expanding, the shoulder blades to balloon me into this position without getting tight in the jaw, the neck. Okay? 2 more. So I'm creating the balloon, the diaphragm spreading and going down into the pelvic floor. I got my seat established. I feel my sit bones anchored. And then here I am. And the arms are just appendages of the opening now, the upper rib cage, the heart. It's not something that's puffing the chest out, it's expansive. And now on the next exhale, hold the balloon, pause. Let your elbows and armpits feel like they're floating. Tongue relaxed. And you could play this game of just feeling that the breath can really slow down. With it, the nervous system. Let's try another one. Normally we do Urdhva Hastasana. What do we do in yoga class? We let the extremities power the body up. Or people that are doing their weights, right? Pumping up their nervous system. How about if we balloon, inhale, we fill up the back lungs, and the hoop of the diaphragm is expanding right up to the scaps, and we come up, exhale. Our sit bones are in a great anchored place, and the arms are floating. We're not locking the elbow joints, the shoulders, the collarbones are open, and we're just floating. So this is radically different than the way that most, try a couple of them. Fill and float. If you want to pause at the end of the exhale, you're welcome to work your pranayama, your calm nervous system. So what's, not to play the devil's advocate here, but what's holding the body up? It's just the tensegrity provided by the diaphragm expanding and opening the heart center of the chest. At the same time, engaging, diaphragm goes down, picks up the rectus abdominals in a much deeper way than most people use. They try to really contract them. So I could start to play. If I wanted to come into a navasana, I roll back, I lift the legs. And I take another breath. And I start to move in my balloon body without stressing. I'm working here. I could stay here and breathe in my half boat. And what happens, now you should be able to feel your abdominal muscles. But what happens to your breath and your nervous system when you hold, you introduce a little bit of work into the picture. So again, if you're a Pilates person or a hardcore yoga person, you're doing ferocious things. And some of you, I won't call you out, have started to feel as they've gotten a little older that doing that stuff to their body actually doesn't serve you. But we have this, again, no pain, no gain, and also very performative Western model of competition. Who can do it the best? Who can do 200 sit-ups? So that gets into the brain. and suddenly you're not in your body anymore, but you're in the other person's body who you're competing with. And if you read the old yoga texts like the Bhagavad Gita, the battle, if there is one, is really inside the body, or the challenge. So I'm just playing here with this balloon breath, and getting you to see a little bit more now as we tone the transverse abdominals. Then we rest and relax, what that would feel like as we start to move in the limbs. The other concept now is just try and feel the sides. So we did the infinity pattern. Let's just go, because there are a few new people, back and forth. Inhale, exhale on the left hip at first. Inhale back, weighting the left hip, exhale, floating forward. And then, can you make a little loop around the hip, a little circle? Inhale, go through the inside of the left hip, roll around the perimeter, exhale back. Can we do the right hip? Inhale, down through the inside of the right hip, go around. So now we've got little wheels going in the hips. Wow. And as I make the infinity pattern, inhaling back, down the inside, around the outside, exhale to center. Can you feel the expansion of the ribs up that side? So if I go down the left hip and I make the wheel coming up that left rib cage, and what you start to realize, just play a little bit here with the infinity pattern, doesn't have to be radical, keep your breath moving with it, is that there are wheels, and we're mobilizing the hip joint, getting you to, or tricking you to move your hip joint, the bone in the, well, the socket. I'm getting you to move your shoulder joint. So those wheels now can turn, and they should turn in the yoga poses. And then sitting on center, coming back to sense of your breath, so that the joint spaces in the hips and the shoulders, which are your connecting circuits, if you will, the extremities are operating in a fluid way. Let's stand. Now you're going to move, always hopefully like a balloon, and do a little bit of asana with this type of movement in the diaphragm. So the first thing we did, or we've done in the past, is to go for a walk with one side. But let's start with our wave action. We're going to drop into chair. You don't have to go that deep. And again, you can kind of bring your hands, like the curling of the front of the wave, into your transverse abdominals. Belly's still soft, but underneath that, feel that expansion of the back ribs. Start to lift with the inhale, all the way up the mid ribs, and then the shoulder blades, and then exhale, and come back down. So that's the complete cycle. Inhale, in comes the wave, the back is the back of the wave curling, all the way up to the top, and then exhale, and just start to move. So don't get too caught up in, and if you prefer, when you stand on the exhale, place the hands on the heart center to chill out the vagus nerve. Now, if you're in class, and you're doing this and you're like, well, I want to do some power yoga. Fine. Inhale, exhale. Let the exhale stop. Sit in your balloon body. And then you can stay and breathe if you want. The undulation pattern now would be internalized. And so if I were to exaggerate what's happening with my diaphragm and my body, this loop system, this pump of the diaphragm, brings up the back ribs and then inflates what I would call the heart pump. Heart literally does pump, but we're feeling the hoop, the yoga hoop of the chest. And I would stay there and breathe and build as much strength in my legs as I want while keeping my nervous system relaxed. Okay? So here it is, the wave, all the way up, like a butterfly, the elbows are bent. Even when I come into Utkatasana, I'm calm. I'm floating like a balloon. My diaphragm is still expanding out and down, tapping me into the deep core. My throat's relaxed, and I breathe as long as I want. And then I take an exhale, just bringing the hands to the heart, which some people don't like because it's like, oh, it takes me back to when I had to go to church or whatever. That's a story that you can play with yourself. Just place your hands on your heart, and you can think, okay, vagus nerve, calm vagus nerve. Let's move a little bit more. And now in yoga, we have asymmetry. So what if we weight on the right side, as we did seated, and we bring the right hand in, like the weight, come up that right rib cage, lower ribs in the back, mid ribs, the scapula. I start to roll my chest a little bit to the left, and the arm is floating with the final expansion of the upper hoop of the rib cage, and then exhale and come down, either hand on heart or just come right down. Now I stand over, inhaling down through that left heel. Hand comes in, the diaphragm. I'm just letting the hand get me in touch with the diaphragm. And then up I come. Just from the sensation of the diaphragm expanding out and down, and the lung inflating, the whole arm, little rotation of the chest. You can go as fast as you want, but we're not doing a fast breath motion. We're trying to expand the body. And what you find with this practice is you can get your breath without actively trying to hold it. You can get your breaths down to, I'm probably at about 2 to 5 a minute here if I really slow down without trying. Just from learning how to create this use of the diaphragm to the lungs, right? And there you just go for your walk. Those that want to do extreme yoga or are doubting the power of the tensegrity, you float up and take a little dive down. You float to the other side, you inflate. Now I'm all integrated and I can float anywhere I want to go. I can go right down to the ground with my balloon body, and I can add levels of difficulty if I want. But what happens in the nervous system here? Am I struggling, or am I calmly abiding in the inside of the body and feeling it? So let's start to move now, with or without the show-off moves, and we'll weight into the right foot, and up comes the right arm. We're going to just step back into our warrior one and come down. And now let's create our wave of warrior one. This is a soft awareness of the fascia, the connective tissue. Yes, your major muscles have to be in play. If you're injured, get a little smaller stance. And I'm inhaling, coming in, the wave, back ribs, mid ribs, shoulder blades. Exhale, I soften. And maybe I pause. If you like movement, move. If you like stillness, sit in stillness. There's no real difference because the breath is always moving. But what you're learning how to do is play and dance with the breath. So regardless of whether you're someone who likes to sit in a yoga pose, that's one camp of yoga, mostly pioneered by the Iyengars. Or whether you're a form of Ashtanga yogi who like to jump around and move in sun salutations to feel your body, doesn't matter. But the thing is here is to feel the use of the breath, expanding those lungs up and engaging the pelvic floor down. So the best of both worlds, I can sit now in the pose if I want. I'm not going to lock out around the knee joints or the low back. I'm going to fill those back kidneys, right? And I can just sit here and breathe. If I want, I can add the level of difficulty. Lift the back heel. I have my balloon. Warrior 3. I step back, inhale, the wave comes up, the diaphragm expands. My nervous system's calm, it floats my arms up. I'm floating. I didn't collapse in the chest. I didn't pull my shoulder blades together. I didn't tense my jaw. Where's the beef? Okay, feet together. Now weighting over to the left side. And the anchor, the diaphragm anchors down through that heel, but it also has the trampoline expansion up and lifts that left arm up. Again, if I want to play with my balloon body, I can do all sorts of tricks, or just step back to warrior 1 on the one side. And then we just start to breathe. So this is the piece that I found missing from most yoga systems. And so bear with me if you're new, because I think I'm onto something here, and you can apply it to any of your daily motions. You're not stressing your body or getting injured doing whatever it is you do. Floating, and I'm working with that diaphragm. Eventually, it takes control. If I calm my nervous system, it slows down and becomes almost like a tidal rhythm. And the breath could stop. In that stopping of the breath, I could start to launch without deflating the balloon into a warrior 3, if I have full integrity or tensegrity of the body. That's up to you and your practice. And then come back to center, drop your arms, relax for a second, and let that calmness spread through the body. Okay, let's move on, and we'll go out to our warrior 2 and do that. So let's go ahead and go for a walk over to the right side, and the right arm fills. Again, you can add the dip down if you want, otherwise just bend the front knee, step back to warrior 2. And for the moment, let's just bring the hands down. by the hips. So in structural yoga classes, this is where the teacher says, put your hands on your inner thighs, pull your knees apart, and it's all very mechanical. The breath has now become divorced from the body, especially if the yoga teacher comes along or you yourself try to yank your body into some biomechanics. You've got to let the organic motion of the breath as you sit here, either with your hands on your belly, one hand on your heart and one in your belly, or just start to play with this, what we did earlier. Inhale, let the diaphragm expand, it's going down and out, and the arms come into the picture. If you're injured in your shoulders or something, then you play with a closer hoop. So you got the diaphragm, trampoline hoop, and then the exhale, the heart hoop. So the ex-Anusara people are probably thinking about that practice. And then maybe the expansion of the exhale, the helium in the heart lifts the arms up. And so you can play in Warrior Two with your breath. You can't access the pelvic floor, you don't go deep because you're just going to punish your hip joints. So it's that access of the pelvic floor, diving down, inhale, and it's like a tripod. The descent of the diaphragm goes down to the pelvic floor and out to the two notches of the hips. And that's happening, gives me my stable tripod, and then and I float. Let's reverse warrior, drop left hand and inhale. Up comes the breath in the right rib cage. And exhale, set the hand on the knee or come down to side angle of the forearm. Keeping the inflation, the diaphragm working in this lower side so it doesn't collapse. Can you feel those right ribs still undulating and opening? Let this left arm just drop for a second. And then let's go for a little swim. Let's breathe open both sets of ribs. So we get the left ribs, like a swimmer. And the arm the joints are soft so that the shoulder, the elbow, the two bones in the forearm are getting massaged, and the fascia in the wrists, everything is subservient to the inflation of the breath. You can be higher if you've got a full use of the diaphragm, both connecting down to the pelvic floor and bringing the lungs up. Now I'm down here. But if I lose my breath, if I start to lose my connection to pelvic floor, the game is over. I crush my right hip and I go to the doctor's office. So we don't want that. Let's turn the feet to parallel. And let's come into our goddess pose. We're going to sink down here and get as close as you want. Feet turned forward, please. Now we can again play the game, which way do the hips tilt, all that business. Forget about it. For now, I got tight hot hips, I got tight out. The breath will take care of it. It's your adjuster. Get comfortable, clearly, sit in a chair if you're not. Where's the diaphragm? Expanding, back ribs, anchoring down. Now I'm in the pelvic floor, and I let the balloon expand. And I can just sit here and play this Urdhva Hastasana game. I can play the hoop. I'm a dancer. I'm building lactic acid in the legs. But I'm not trying to clench my jaw. I'm not thinking to myself, no pain, no gain. I'm thinking I'm a full balloon helium balloon. And I use the breath to inflate the body, to allow it to do these difficult things while keeping everything relaxed. Let's try the other side. Bring the feet together. And relax when you stand. If you're breathing diaphragmatically, the whole business of tensing the muscles, the major muscles, becomes subservient to the expansion of the diaphragm down into the pelvic floor, down into the creases of the upper legs. You can feel it maybe as you close your eyes in the inner thighs. And on the exhale, maybe you feel the outer hips release down and the heels, so that the breath diaphragm movement starts to tie into the legs as well, but in an expansive way. We're going to articulate that a bit later. For now, shifting the weight to the left foot, sliding the right foot back, we inflate all the way up that left side. Bend the front knee, step back to warrior two. For now, drape the arms down and just start to find your breath. It's very hard not to go into analysis. Oh, this knee, outer knee up. Let the diaphragm expand down into the hip creases, the pelvic floor, sitting you down and spreading the inner legs. And then bring the lungs, bring the balloon, fill the balloon. Get comfortable if you want a tighter, narrower stance. How much can you fill those lungs? And remember, it's not going up into the throat. And if you're working with injury, you work a little lower with the arms. Otherwise, the back ribs spread open like a big sail. The shoulder blades open. And you sit in the pose. And you calmly breathe. Remember, the inhales are expanding and lifting the rib cage and the arms. At the same time, the diaphragm has the downward, we call it tonic motion, to the pelvic floor, informing you of that deep core engagement, which holds the hips in the proper place. Let's reverse our warrior, drop our right hand, fill the entire left rib cage, and exhale without letting that part of the balloon deflate. Come to side angle, could just be your left hand on your knee. Can you feel the expansion? And then let's let that right arm and right rib cage fill and bring a little movement like a swimmer, like a crawl stroke. Sure, part of your brain is by saying, push back heel down. I could push my back heel into the ground, which I've told you to do. But what's the diaphragm doing? The diaphragm is inhaling and expanding and lifting this right arm up and over on the one hand, but also going down, trampling down, it's pushing back to the pelvic floor, which is then connecting to the back heel. So now I've got the lower and the upper body really connected to the breath in this expansiveness. And if I have my expansion, I can go as deep as I want. Come up on the inhale and take the feet to parallel. once again, goddess pose. So, again, if you've been studying with me for a while, this is a new quest for me. And what I'm realizing is that the really bad things are the locking of the joints, the locking of the breath, and holding a pose with no breath awareness. And this is what the structuralist yoga people do. The vinyasa people, on the other hand, can move nicely. They have some awareness of this deep core, but their nervous systems are hyper. So we want to get the best of both worlds. Then whether we're moving or still, doesn't matter. They're the same thing. The breath is still informing. So sit down in your goddess, or if you want to call it horse dance. You could be in stillness. You could be just holding your balloon, feeling the expansion of the diaphragm and the back ribs, up the shoulder blades lift. It could almost be this kind of bellows action. Inhale, exhale, like that. You want to work in a Tai Chi way. I think you find if you abide in the breath and feel these connections down and up together, you can do amazing long holds if that's what you're after. Or if you want to get bigger in your hoop, expanding your energy by expanding your breath. How low do you sit? Depends on your connection down through that, call it your umbilicus, but your rectus abdominis to the pelvic floor. How well informed is that, or how tied into the diaphragm? Okay, let's come up and let's do our wide-legged down dog that we've been doing. So we're going to dive into Prasarita. Normally, what do? You hands to your hips, you lift your chest. This is the old way we've done it. And you yank the body into extension. What does that do to the breath? Well, the front of the diaphragm pops open the front ribs. Now I'm structurally unsound. If I were to suddenly fall backwards, not so good. So what if we soften our knees? We bring the little wave action, and then, like a butterfly stroke, place the hands on the floor. Now, if you want, I've shown you the use of a chair or a table. You can't get your hands to the floor. Head is neutral. And then I use the diaphragm again to inhale back ribs, side ribs, shoulder blades, and I start to crawl with the inchworming of the inhale. Crawl the fingers forward. There's no pressure on the shoulder joints, and I can keep my knees bent, but my diaphragm, like the middle of the slinky, is connecting to both ends, the tailbone, pelvic floor, and the heart, to extend and expand with each breath. Neck is neutral, head is neutral. Go as long as you want, but don't let the arms yank you out of your floating heart center. Then you can walk the hands back toward the feet. Drop your head, hold your elbows, and breathe more. Don't lock the knees. Don't lock the breath. And you're cascading your head, your ribs open as you breathe. If you want to be narrower with your feet, get narrower. If it's too much on strain on your hip joints, doesn't matter. But keep the wave action of the diaphragm. In fact, everybody can start to move your feet in closer and closer. So we're moving toward forward fold. And then we're going to sit down in Malasana and see some people's ankle flexibility requires that they take their toes out like a duck. Now I'm in my back ribs naturally. I've done this and taught this to you guys as an orangutan-like back body. Now nobody wants to be rounded in their back because we can walk around and see a lot of older people with this kyphosis. But that's not what we're after. We're after expanding all the ribs. And I can start to exhale. Let the soft chest rise. If I've opened those ribs. Sure, I can bring the palms together and I can use my elbows and my inner knees. But if I do that move, which we've done in the past, produce integrity, I could easily start to go into what I would call this compression behavior. And the collarbones you can feel getting pressed, and the shoulders getting pressed, and then I try to resist and open. It's not without merit, but you can do the same thing with your diaphragm. Have a towel under your heels if you need it. And I'm just bringing those ribs open and the collarbones open here so that I could eventually just have my hands turning up to the sky like that. Let's have a seat. Speaking of that, and where did we start? We started with this proposition that you could do that sort of move, a roll back and open in this wide-legged Navasana. Inhale and so those that are able or would like to play in this, it'd be a good comparison move, or maybe you just roll back ribs and you have your hands on your knees, your elbows out, your chest lifted, you're connected through the whole body, and you breathe. Is your throat tense? How's your heart center, your core? Everything should be able, in the best yoga pose, to be almost a form of meditation. And then, yes, we do want to challenge the body because it needs to be kept strong, but not past the point of losing awareness. So once you get the helium balloon body, all the difficult yoga poses, all the movement of the extremities are merely extending off of that piece. We call it the bandhas. I'm calling it the diaphragm. However you want to see it anatomically. Let's come back to seated or lie down if you prefer. Allow yourself to now relax. And if you've done this correctly, your breath will have opened your body in a pleasing way. You will have gotten a little bit of work. And now as you close your eyes, try to feel that center circle, if you will, down in the pelvic floor is a little wheel, and float on that center line. Allow the body to float. Allow the shoulders to relax, hips to relax, and everything to be able to float and move ever so slightly. The tongue and the throat relax as well, the brain relaxes. The back of the neck is telescoping upward with the slight descent of the skull, front of the skull forward. And you listen to your breath once again. Focusing on the end of the exhales once again, let them come to a pause and take that moment, those moments of pause, not to hold your breath, but to just plug back into your nervous system. If you created any undue stress. You didn't do too much. You just dissolve it in the residue of the exhale. Okay, so we'll be delineating this more this week with the ball work we did last Wednesday, and we're going to be starting to work a little bit more on what happens in the loop of the inner and the outer leg. So enjoy your day, namaste, and all of you, if you want to say hi. Every time you do something strong today, like even getting up off the floor,